This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
In a heated session, members of the Iraqi Parliament have openly accused their government of negligence. Members of the Parliament have decided to summon the country's Prime Minister, the Ministers of Defense and Interior, as well as other security officials to the Parliament over failure to protect the Iraqi people. Amidst an angry and sad atmosphere, Baghdad, today, bid farewell to nearly 130 fallen victims in the worst bombings since the invasion of the country. Muna Abu Diab reports. Amidst tears and prayers, the Iraqi people spent the night. Today was no different as hundreds of Baghdad families bid farewell to more than 120 loved ones.
This area is very old and the buildings are run down. Why did they target it? Who committed this act?
Many questions found no answers here as the area was turned into rubble in the aftermath of the Black Tuesday bombings. This is the third well-coordinated attack to hit the Iraqi capital in the past 4 months. The perpetrators seem to be targeting Iraq's vital installations, which include ministerial buildings and heavily guarded government institutions. This security breach has caused concern among the Iraqi public, with many turning to the authorities for answers.
The Iraqi government bears the full responsibility for these bombings. Many people have died.
They're staging security checkpoints everywhere. Every 2 meters you encounter a checkpoint. It must be an inside job.
Meanwhile, the Iraqi parliament witnessed an unprecedented heated debate.
No one is immune from accountability, including the security minister and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. We need to summon all of these ministers and question them. We will not allow anyone to cover up this case. Anyone with a clear conscience will help expose those responsible for this bombing.
The parliament made a decision to summon the top brass of the Iraqi government to the interrogation room. One question remains unanswered. Who is stripping Iraq of its livelihood and stealing its dream? The Iraqi Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, addressed the nation over the bloody attacks. Without mentioning them by name, al-Maliki accused foreign groups of standing behind the latest bomb attacks. The Iraqi Prime Minister said that he will order a review of all security measures, in addition to firing several security ministers. Al-Maliki warned all Iraqi politicians against capitalizing on the incidents during their campaign ahead of the parliamentary elections, set for March 7, 2010.
The chairman of the Internal Affairs Committee in the British Parliament demanded that the immigration authorities in his country stop the deportations of Iraqi refugees. This came after the Iraqi government returned a British plane with Iraqi deportees to the UK. The Iraqi government had returned to London 33 Iraqi deportees out of 43 on the 15th of October because their lives were at risk.
Iraqis do not face problems inside Iraq, but rather all over the world. Some Iraqis are displaced within the country, but others are forced to leave. Amidst contradictory news reports about a relative increase in stability and security in Baghdad and the rest of Iraq, many Iraqis fled to neighboring and other countries, including Britain. Many questions were raised recently after the Iraqi government refused to let Iraqi citizens who applied for political asylum in Britain to return home.
تساؤلات عديدة طرحت بعد رفض السلطات العراقية لمواطنين عراقيين.
The British government had denied their applications and returned them to Iraq on board a private plane. However, the Iraqi government turned them right back to Britain.
مستأجرة خصيصا لهذا الغرض وعادوا مجددا إلى بريطانيا. النائب العمالي البريطاني
MP Keith Vaz, chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee, said that the British government did not treat the Iraqi refugees humanely, reiterating that his committee is concerned because the deportees were not even told to which part of Iraq they were going to be deported. He demanded that the British government explain the following: the reasons behind deporting the Iraqi refugees to their country, will the UK take similar measures in the future, how much did the deportation procedure cost, and did the UK take good care of the Iraqi refugees before deporting them. Vaz also demanded an investigation to see whether the British government had told the Iraqi refugees where they were going to be deported in Iraq and the reason behind the sudden decision to deport them, which was humiliating to the Iraqi refugees. In October, the British authorities deported a wave of Iraqi political asylum seekers, just as they had expelled 632 Iraqi refugees in 2005 and 2008. About 4 million Iraqi refugees are displaced in Arab and foreign countries. They face harsh living conditions. They are stuck between the threat of being imprisoned in their host countries due to their illegal status and their inability to pay fines and the difficulties of returning to their homeland.
The Constitutional Court in Turkey postponed looking into banning the activities of the Democratic Society Party, DTP, which is accused of supporting the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. The Attorney General's office demanded that the DTP party be closed and that the political activities of dozens of its members be stopped.
The EU warned Turkey, which hopes to become a member of the European Union, that banning the Democratic Society Party would constitute a human rights violation. The Turkish Attorney General, who failed last year to unseat the Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan under the pretext that he violated the country's secular constitution, sued the DTP party. The debates that started in the Constitutional Court were preceded by Kurdish protests. The court may decide to dissolve this party, which is the only one that supports the Kurds in the Turkish parliament. The recent developments inside the Turkish Supreme Court come at a time when the Justice and Development Party, led by Prime Minister Erdogan, is trying to improve the conditions of the Kurdish citizens in Turkey and end the conflict with Kurdish separatists. This armed conflict has lasted 20 years between Turkey and the armed Kurds, who want to establish a Kurdish homeland in southeastern Turkey. So far, 40,000 people have been killed in this conflict. Turkey has witnessed tension in the Kurdish region in recent days when Kurds protested harsh prison conditions of their leader, Abdullah Öcalan. Meanwhile, 10 soldiers were killed and injured in an ambush that was set by armed Kurds, which may once again raise tensions between the government and the Kurdish citizens in Turkey. Islam Muhe Eldin, BBC.
President Shimon Peres rejected Syrian demands for an Israeli agreement to return the Golan Heights as a precondition for the renewal of peace talks between Jerusalem and Damascus. Peres insisted that a series of Israeli leaders have conducted talks in good faith and without preconditions.
The problem with the good news about Syria is that every time they are being published, they are being accompanied by a denial. The Prime Minister brought the good news before our parliament, but it didn't take moments when the Syrians denied it. I want to state our position very clearly. We want to have peace with Syria. We are ready to talk with Syria directly, but we need an intermediary for. We're ready to talk of any subject that one of the sides want to introduce. Actually, 3 prime ministers of Israel offered already to Syria a wide range of possibilities. The Syrians refused. If they are right now ready to talk directly without prior conditions, very well. Because there are subjects they want to raise, but there are subjects we want to raise. You cannot have half a peace, namely concerning the Golan Heights, without having the other half of peace concerning Iran and Hezbollah. It must be a full, comprehensive peace.
Justice Minister Yaakov Naaman is at the center of a new uproar. Speaking at a conference of rabbis and rabbinic judges in Jerusalem, Naaman said that the law of the Torah will soon be restored as an alternative to the state's current legal system. Naaman added that the primary and ultimate words of the Torah, the heritage of our fathers, contain a complete solution to the questions we face. Meretz chairman MK Chaim Oron slammed Naaman, saying that the justice minister's declarations indicate a worrying process of the Talibanization of Israeli society. Former Justice Minister Amnon Rubinstein said Naaman's remarks would rob Israel of its character as a Jewish democratic state. Science Minister Daniel Ershkovitz from the National Union Party applauded Naaman's comments, saying that the minister simply envisions a combination of religious values and pluralism. Naaman's spokesman issued a clarification, saying the justice minister did not seek to replace state law with Jewish religious law, but rather was speaking in general terms about returning to the glory of the Torah.
Egypt has started building an iron wall along its border with Gaza to stop the transfer of basic supplies to the besieged coastal enclave. The wall, which will be up to 10 kilometers long, is impossible to cut or melt. Now, the tunnels running under it and the last remaining lifelines for Gazans have been destroyed by mostly Israeli airstrikes, but they've been continuously rebuilt despite a number of casualties. Now Egypt plans to make sure that doesn't happen again. A joint American-Egyptian patrol has been trying to find the tunnels by using underground sensors. Israel has cut off Gaza from the rest of the world. The move has forced Palestinians to use tunnels to carry basic necessities like food and medicine into the besieged coastal area. Well, the advisor to Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh tells us more about Egypt's move to build a wall along the Gaza border.
The issue of building a security fence or something like this is something between Egypt and Israel. But on the border with Rafah, it's a different issue. As long as there is a closure and the people here in Gaza under siege, we have to find a way to survive. I don't think the Egyptian will try to starving the Palestinian or squeeze them to the corner, because they know what's going to be the consequences of something like this. So I don't think that's just, maybe they have pressure from the Israelis, from the Americans. They try to to prove that they are cooperating in this security thing. But they know, and the Egyptians, they understand, if they're gonna really shut all these tunnels, they have to open the Rafah crossing, and Israeli should open also the rest of the crossing for a humanitarian reason. I can't contemplate that Gaza totally sealed and no foods or humanitarian aids will cross or medical supplies to Gaza. So there all the time will be a way that the Palestinian will find a way to survive, either through tunnels or through opening the crossing or breaching the wall.
The European Parliament has demanded a full explanation from Israel about its refusing to let EU lawmakers visit the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the European Parliament said Israeli officials must explain why they barred the European delegation from traveling to Gaza, despite initially authorizing the visit. The statement also said the cancellation came a few hours after the European Council reaffirmed its support for an independent Palestinian state and called for a halt in Israeli settlement activities. The European lawmakers had planned to meet UN and Hamas officials in the coastal enclave. Israel canceled the visit for what it called security risks. Tel Aviv has frequently blocked the entry of various delegations from political, humanitarian, and rights group to the besieged Gaza Strip.
Well, Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh has rejected the European Union's statement on the future of Jerusalem Al-Quds.
The position of the European Union is half a step. The step should be completed and Jerusalem must be endorsed as the capital of the Palestinian state. The Palestinian people are still looking forward to a more progressive position from the EU regarding Jerusalem and the rights of the Palestinian people in general.
And his comments come after the EU urged the Palestinians to agree to having Jerusalem Al-Quds as the future capital of both Israel and Palestine. The acting Palestinian Authority chief, Mahmoud Abbas, has also criticized the EU for weakening the Swedish proposal on the future status of Jerusalem. The proposal initially said it would not recognize any changes to the pre-1967 borders and call for the recognition of East Jerusalem Al-Quds as the capital of a Palestinian state. It was later decided that the status of the city be negotiated during the EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency projects a huge budget deficit next year due to an increase in services to meet the Palestinian refugees' growing needs if the foundations and countries do not fulfill their obligations to support the agency.
What would their life be like if the help stops?
It will mean a slow death. The Palestinian people will die little by little, slowly. The aid has postponed the Palestinian people's death.
The living conditions will be bad here. This is what we live on. We receive the aid every 3 months. Every day, every minute and second, we're waiting for it. If it doesn't exist anymore, the situation will be different. It will be like Somalia.
God does not leave anyone. If people don't tell others about this, many would be starving.
In the Gaza Strip, a catastrophe may happen because the siege has hit its peak. The UNRWA has warned that its deficit in 2010 may reach 10% of the total budget. This will be reflected in the services and aid that the agency provides to the West Bank and Gaza and refugees in diaspora.
Everyone will be harmed. There are about 4.7 million Palestinian refugees who receive aid from the UNRWA, not only in Gaza and the West Bank. The deficit will have a big impact on everyone. We are ready to work hard to overcome this deficit so that the services that we provide won't be affected.
This deficit has resulted from several causes. The most important reason is the global financial crisis and the war on Gaza, which depleted part of the budget. In addition to that, some countries failed to pay their dues. Arab countries pay about 1%, while the Arab League's resolution stipulates that these countries should pay 8%. The crisis doesn't stop here. It may also affect the employees' salaries.
Since the UNRWA started working here 60 years ago, its budget has always been limited. There are promises to fill the deficit gap by the end of this year, but these promises have not materialized. We hope that in the next several days and weeks of this month, we will be able to acquire funds so that we can pay the salaries of more than 30,000 employees, not only in Gaza and the West Bank, but also in various areas where the UNRWA operates.
The refugees rely on the agency's various services, from education and health to nutritional materials. If the agency's warning turns into reality, the people living under siege may enter their most difficult period because the agency provides them with their basic necessities.
تشهد القدس اليوم مظاهرة للمستوطنين اليهود ضد القيود التي تقول الحكومة
Today, Jerusalem witnessed a Jewish demonstration against the restrictions that the Israeli government has finally imposed on settlement construction in the West Bank for the next 10 months. Palestinians rejected the Israeli measure, saying that it is not sufficient because it only restricts the construction of new settlement units, while allowing for the construction of 3,000 settlement units that already received permits.
Security forces are here based on the request of an Israeli building inspector. Jewish settlers are protesting the inspector's unwelcome message: stop the construction. The settlers, however, will not have to stop the construction of all settlements. The Israeli government imposed what it called restraints only on the construction of new settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. This is yet another settlement. These images can be seen throughout the West Bank. So far, the building inspectors seem to be winning, especially when considering that the demonstrations have not been violent. Eliza Goldman is one of the Jewish settlers who feels that the Israeli government has betrayed them. She still has to pay the mortgage and the fees of architectural designs for a home that she can no longer build for her family.
There is some kind of phenomenon that occurs with the right-wing government.
There's some kind of phenomenon that occurs in the right-wing government. They make promises and then they have to prove to the world that they are not extremists and that they want peace. They end up doing exactly the opposite of what we voted them to do.
Exactly the opposite of what we voted them to do.
The so-called policy of restraint is part of a political maneuver by Israel to avoid strained relations with one of its most important allies. However, some government officials still reject the policy of restraining settlement construction.
This is a very difficult decision, as you know.
This is a very difficult decision, as you know. I opposed it because it is opposed to our values.
It's opposed to our values.
Settlers' leaders are lifting the banner of defiance. Here they are continuing the construction, thus establishing yet another symbol of this defiance. The Israeli policy might be intended to make the Palestinians appear as if they are the ones who are obstructing the peace negotiations. However, at this juncture, the Israeli government may have to choose peace with the Palestinians or peace with the settlers.
The Pakistani government started implementing travel measures, banning Afghan citizens from entering Pakistan without a visa permit.
Thousands of travelers were stranded at border crossings between the two countries. Our correspondent in Afghanistan, Samir Alawi, traveled to a border crossing point to assess the suffering of stranded travelers.
الحدود بين باكستان وأفغانستان لم تعد مفتوحة.
The border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is no longer open. These people must now get a visa from Pakistan prior to entering the country. Officials on both sides of the border have declined to comment on the new Pakistani measures. The measures come after several of Pakistan's major cities, including Peshawar, were hit hard by a series of bomb attacks.
I don't want to get a passport or show my identification card at the border. This is my country and I should be able to go back and forth with the greatest of ease. In the event they deny me entry, there are many other routes that I can take.
There are between 20 to 30,000 travelers, mainly Afghans, who use the Turkham border crossing between Jalalabad and Peshawar on a daily basis. As the visa requirement measure went into effect, few travelers were able to cross to Pakistan. Meanwhile, thousands of travelers, including women, children, and the ill, were stranded at the border.
I've been waiting here since the morning. They attacked us with batons and humiliated us.
The Afghan government has taken similar measures following the toppling of the Taliban regime. Since then, the Afghan government has gradually tightened travel restrictions on non-Afghan citizens. This may explain the decision by the Afghan government not to condemn this latest Pakistani move. On the other hand, the new Pakistani measures have not altered trade activities between the two countries. In addition, they have not affected the transport of military equipment of the foreign forces deployed in Afghanistan. Also, they have not affected the Afghan transit trade activities between Kabul and the world via Pakistan. The Pakistani government didn't hold Afghanistan responsible for the bombings that targeted Peshawar and other Pakistani cities. However, the latest Pakistani move sends a message to Kabul. This news comes after Islamabad accused the Indian intelligence services of using the Afghan territories to disrupt Pakistani security. Samir Alawi, Al Jazeera, Turkham, the Pakistani-Afghan border. Confrontations between the Saudi army and Houthi infiltrators have calmed down significantly. Only small skirmishes remain, while the Saudi forces continue searching for landmines. Meanwhile, the old city of Sada is witnessing the fiercest and most violent battle since it was raided. All kinds of different weapons are being used in these armed confrontations.
5 weeks have passed since Saudi Arabia started carrying out armed attacks on the Houthis along the border area with Yemen. The Yemeni army has entered its 5th month of this war with the rebels, but it seems that the war between the Saudi forces and the Houthis has stopped except for small skirmishes and some operations by the Saudi Air Force.
Now, the situation has started to calm down after large groups were imprisoned. Thank God. Things are normal now, God willing.
For the past several days, Saudi forces have continued to clamp down on the Dukhan mountain and other locations surrounding it, and to dismantle landmines. Meanwhile, battles are raging in the old city of Sada. They are the most violent battles since the Yemeni forces entered the city. Dozens of people were killed and injured from both sides who have been using different kinds of weapons. The Yemeni army is calling on citizens to leave the city. A military commander said that the army is trying to end the battle swiftly and cleanse the city of the rebels.
مسؤول عسكري أكد أن الجيش يسعى إلى الحسم السريع للمعركة وتطهير المدينة من.
He explained the armed forces have tightened their control over Shaiban neighborhood, Al-Dawar, Al-Jerba, Al-Drab, and Bab Nashran, and arrested dozens of Houthi rebels.
واعتقلت عشرات المتمردين الحوثيين. وفي محافظة الجوف شن الطيران اليمني غارات.
The Yemeni forces launched air raids against Houthi rebels in Al-Zahir district as tribal men who are loyal to the government spread in the area and established checkpoints to prevent the infiltration of the Houthis.
Sheikh Hussein Abdullah Al-Ahmar, a member of the Yemeni parliament, said that the lack of progress in any of the war fronts was the result of deliberate softness, mismanagement, and bad leadership, dragging the country to this bad condition. In a press conference, Al-Ahmar demanded an urgent investigation into the reasons behind what he described as a stalemate on the war front. He also pointed out that this situation may cause catastrophic consequences for the entire country. Al-Ahmar added that some points pertaining to the war are mysterious, and that the inability to end the war will lead to dangerous consequences pertaining to security, development, and the army's morale.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.